Hmm. Hi, Bill Henshaw here again, Constitutional Kook headquarters, and I've been talking a lot on recent videos, about the astounding situations we find ourselves in here now with the COVID crap and the court packing plan and the election fraud, and there's been a lot of that, by the way, quote unquote election. There are no elections. That's a video for another time. But it occurs to me, what I've been saying, and those of you who've been watching the videos, you know that the crown jewel of all of my unopposed constitutional issues is there are no states. Now, what that means, among other things, is that there will be big changes in law enforcement, especially with these law enforcement thugs. And I don't know how this changed over the course of my lifetime, but when I was growing up, they were called peace officers. And we rarely, if ever, had any of the nonsense that goes on these days. It just didn't happen. I'd love to get back to that, get back to our states, get back to our a simple life where we have rights secured by the Constitution and everybody in the state capital, respects them. And that can and should happen. And a big deal here, with the victims like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, is that there is real justice out there. Because if I'm right, and you send me an email and get information on my materials, unincourt@gmail.com, and you're going to find out I'm right. There are no states. If that's true, then what that means is there are no laws on the books because they've not been enacted by a lawful de jure state government. What that means is people out there masquerading as law enforcement personnel aren't. They are not acting in any official capacity. Accordingly, they can't come in there and make any affirmative defenses on that basis, and they sure as hell can't claim qualified immunity, under Section 5 of the goddamn 14th War Amendment, because there was no government there were no laws on the books, and since these are sworn officers that have a duty to be bound by this Constitution and the laws enacted in pursuance thereof, they should have known this very well before they took any actions against any black victims or any victims at all. Yeah, that's strict liability, acts of treason to the Constitution. I get it. It is. Now, the people that we confront on the streets, and there aren't many of the government officials these days we even ever see in person, that's going to be the new normal. Don't want to have a damn thing to do with us except on quote unquote election day. But that means that, the people that are training you in your jobs, and often, as in California, that involves county council, another state bar association member required to be one. And they don't train them, and maybe they don't get trained. I mean, ultimately, it devolves on what I would call the territorial governor, who has the sworn duty to see the laws are faithfully executed. If they do their job, and the attorney general maybe is the next one that gets trained, and he trains local people on our level, or the board of supervisors maybe, and the sheriff and what have you, to train their subordinates. None of this happens because they're going to realize that almost all of the statutory schemes on the books now only apply to artificial corporate entities. And George Floyd probably wasn't one of those. So that means the law enforcement types should not be out there enforcing laws against people they knew or should have known weren't subject to it, and knew or should have known that the trial court wouldn't have one iota of jurisdiction. Now, that may be a little bit unfair to the law enforcement types, but better to have that unfairness go there than against, the citizens that compose the sovereign body politic of the nation and republic, and inhabitants of states and or inhabitants of territories who rely on the good faith actions of the people in office. It is what it is. If they want to turn around and sue their subordinates in a separate suit that doesn't involve us, fine, go for it. I might even be willing to testify as an expert witness on their behalf in that setting, but not in our setting when we make claims of rights there and petitions for redress of grievance, and they knew or should have known that we had rights that they were bound to respect. That's what makes a big difference, because now you start sending these bastards off to jail. And by the way, you law enforcement types out there, be damn sure, at least at first, it's going to be you. Probably won't even be the county sheriff, let alone board of supervisors, let alone anyone in your state capital, who all think they have a hell of a lot of immunity here pursuant to Section 5 of the non-existent 14th War Amendment. But they'll initially be a lot harder to get. That's one of the goals I have before I go out of here, is to see that at least happens on a few occasions, and you get people like that thrown in the hoosegow themselves, and or for acts of treason. Those of you who don't know what the penalty for that is could check with Julius and Ethel Rosenberg if they were still alive. That's 2,000 volts. And you had a sworn duty and you failed to execute it. There isn't even an affirmative defense for that, as far as I'm personally concerned. And that's what it is that we need to start doing, because how many of these people is it going to take to end up in a hoosegow for a lengthy sentence before the people that get into these jobs follow them recognize they better damn well do the job they swore an oath on a Bible to do? It's not hard. It really isn't. All we have to do is get back to it. And we can't do that with all this divide and conquer BS they've been using against us for at least 150 years. We have to work together. And that calls for a clear recognition of who the members of the sovereign body politic of this nation and republic are. Okay, lawful de jure, just sanguinis, free white state citizens. Simple. In that system, however, you have inhabitants of states and inhabitants of territories who have real rights, not government-granted privileges, that can be enforced in courts of law, and particularly by the right to trial by jury. And all of us would have that according to the course of the common law, with the jury having the power to rule on the facts and the law. That's the biggest, most impressive check and balance in the whole system that's ever been there. And it's been on the books since the Magna Carta in 1215. We had just very conveniently for the New York banksters gotten away from it, especially in the last 150 years. But we have to get back. That's where we control the state legislatures, especially if there are no big changes there of the type I hope to see. As I suggested with the California Assembly, with 80 members, a number unchanged since 1879, by the way, and the population has expanded 40 times, if not a little more than that. So back then, the racial representation might have been 15 or 16,000 to 1, well within what one would think of the normal limits. Nowadays, it's 500,000 to 1. There isn't any way that they have any authority in Sacramento to pass any laws whatsoever. Even with 100% quorum, it doesn't work. Just the way it is. So we get back to what we're supposed to have. And if we do that, by the way, your state government is still important, but most of the power belongs in the county seat. Where it's local, it's much easier to go and instruct our representatives. It's much easier to nominate and elect those who will do the job if the local people don't do it. And so much less expensive overall, that you don't create all this government debt that they're in the process. I mean, my God, Biden talking about what, $6.5 trillion with a T? The only good news about that for them is that those are undefined dollars, according to Mariner S. Eccles, the late unlamented head of the Federal Reserve System back in the 1940s, said this on the record in the House Subcommittee on Banking and Finance, that the feds could create money out of debt, and without debt, there'd be no money. That's another piece of BS we have to get rid of as quickly as we possibly can and get back to the normal government that we're supposed to have. And I believe it's still doable. And it won't be perfect, and it's going to take some fighting to get there, but maybe not as much as you would think, because the amount of things you're going to learn getting my constitutional defense document packets. Send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com. And with a little study and concentration on your part, and it won't take that much, and some complimentary email assistance from me and some complimentary phone calls too, you can go into even their courts and state your position with attitude and with authority. And the first time you shut them down, like what I did in South Carolina in my felony case, 30 seconds. stunned the courtroom into silence. They'd never seen anything like that. And here I am standing there alone in a red jail suit, manacled hand and foot, and they were the ones in trouble with the law, and everybody knew it. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? And would be if they would have taught you anything in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, too. I didn't get it 50 years ago. Don't feel bad. And it goes back further than that. Because we don't know. If you don't know your rights, you have a hell of a hard time being able to enforce them. That's a fact. That's what I'm here to try to fix and make it as simple and easy for you to do as possible, where it won't take you 10,000 hours like what it took me in those musty old stacks of law books that you see Berserkly and later Hastings, neither of which I can get into these days, by the way, for want of an ID, and probably before the year is over, a want of a vaccine passport so you can get into places like this. I mean, you can just see all this crap coming, and the vaccine is useless, not even a vaccine. Um, and by the way, I check with these videos. You'll get some links to some videos with some medical experts talking about it. Not me; it isn't my area. Although I know a fair amount of history about the American involvement with chemical and biological warfare, a lot of which is out of Fort Detrick, Maryland. And that's enough to be very troubling without more, trust me. But yeah, it's just the way it is. They got to create, keep creating these emergencies and this, that, and the other. Now, the good news, and I haven't said this as often as I should, they can create whatever goddamn emergency they want to create. The problem with it that they have is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the Constitution of the United States says the writ of habeas corpus can't be suspended except in cases of rebellion or invasion. COVID pandemic crap doesn't do it. It can't. That would destroy the Constitution if it got construed that way. And that's what I'm convinced that the 9 old farts, at least, are not going to be doing with the events that have happened there in the last month or so. They're finally waking up to the reality there that they are an independent court and they have judicial power. And it's about damn time they started executing it and ordering the lower courts to do the same thing. But that's a big leap forward when that happens. Start getting our Constitution back, our states back, our property, our rights. Wow, that's what I'm in it for. And, that's why I've been, invested 5 decades here, 15 years all in. But the good news about that is at the age of 73 later in the year, life is ahead of me, not behind. And I've got a lot of life left here based on family genes, family history, a little good luck thrown in the mix. So I got another 8 or 10 years, maybe more than that. Who knows? And that's why I want to get the word out to you so we can all work together and end this divide and conquer crap. So that said, subscribe, like the videos. Remember to tell your friends, get the word out. And send me an email for information for my materials, unincourt@gmail.com. The sooner we start working together, the quicker we get our lives and our property and our rights back. Thank you.